Welcome to this HFS Videocast. I'm Mark Reed-Edwards, Chief Marketing Officer at HFS. Today we talk with one of the analysts behind the HFS Capital Markets Services Top 10 for 2022, which we just released. Joining me is Elena Christopher, HFS Financial Services Research Leader. Elena, great to have you here today.
Great to be here, Mark. Looking forward to chatting with you about this fabulous report today.
So what's at the core of the HFS Capital Markets Services Top 10?
Well, fundamentally, what's at the core of this capital markets study is, so I have the responsibility for looking at financial services overall. At a high level, I break that down into banking and into capital markets. Something that I've learned from both being in industry and now for the last 5 years of being an analyst tracking the broad financial services market is that most of the spending, and I can say this one easy stat on this, is roughly about like any given IT and business process service provider, as they support the broad financial services market, again, banking and capital markets, about 70% of both revenue and clients, varies a little bit, but revenue and or clients, it's about 70% geared towards banking and about 30% geared towards capital markets. And so there's always been this little bit of an imbalance. So I felt very strongly that we needed to do a report that looked at almost the underdog, if you will. Capital markets, it may be the lesser revenue opportunity, but it's the heart and soul of our global financial markets. So it was really important to do a study looking at what the trends and dynamics are within capital markets. A quick definitional point. So capital markets, it's an umbrella term that covers the sell side. So it's the investment banks and the broker dealers. It also covers the buy side. So that's essentially the asset managers, the wealth managers. And then there's also a category that we include under the capital markets umbrella, which I loosely refer to as market infrastructure. But these are all of the ancillary companies that are essential to making the buy side and the sell side actually be able to conduct commerce and conduct their transactions. These are things like the exchanges, data services and data providers, the custodians, the servicers, that again, their functions are enabling the buy side and sell side to do their work. So what we really wanted to do with this study was to shine a light on what's going on in the capital markets domain and really look at who the key service providers are who are helping all of the enterprises under that capital markets umbrella across all those different subdomains, who are really helping them with their form of modernization, embrace of cloud, and to do all of those things that we've heard loosely called digital transformation on the banking side of the house, but really trying to understand what that looks like for capital markets.
So Elena, can you tell me what you saw in the providers you studied? And also, what are enterprises looking for when they evaluate these providers?
Absolutely. Okay, so first of all, what we saw on the providers, the context here. So I mentioned that capital markets, it's an umbrella term, and so it's got all of these sub-markets or subdomains underneath it. So what we see in the providers is really we were evaluating and looking to their ability to really support and have specialization within a subdomain, but also particularly for many of the enterprises out there that they're potentially servicing that are multinational or global. They often have complex businesses. So we're also looking at service providers that could have the subdomain specialization, but also work across multiple domains. So sort of levels of being able to stack levels of competency, if you will. In terms of what capital markets firms are looking for, really what the needs are, some of the key things that we learned from talking with, like we do very extensive reference checks and we make sure to have very strong voice of the customer because we don't just want to represent the supply side. We really, of course, the supply side only exists because it's meeting the demand of the enterprises. So we always take a lot of care to go deep and do lots of interviews and surveys and such with capital markets firms in their own rights. And so when we assess them based on what their biggest needs are right now, across all of these subdomains, we found a very strong theme of needing to modernize their businesses, optimize processes, and really drive enhanced digital customer experience. Digital customer experience, I'd mentioned kind of that dynamic between banking and capital markets. Digital customer experience has been the hallmark of the banking sector, trying to get some of the same semblance of a strong user experience, even at the interface level, bringing some of that into trading and asset management and domains such as that. The two biggest needs that rose to the top from talking with capital markets firms is their ability to cultivate an enhanced capability to use data as an asset, and then that modernization point. So it's a lot of tech infrastructure, reinvention. It's really hard to throw out the old, so figuring out what you can do to modernize and gain ground while planning a larger tech intervention. And then the data as an asset piece, that cuts in so many different ways, but one of the real key themes, it's both informing both internal operations, as well as managing reporting, as well as, of course, how you do that for your clients. There's always that internal, external component within capital markets firms. What was also great to see is that we map what the biggest requirements are from the capital markets firms. That's the demand side. And then we map that to what we heard from the service provider community in terms of what their fastest growing services are. We saw just absolute alignment. That shouldn't be surprising, right? But you would be surprised in some of these analyses. But we saw very strong alignment between what customers need and what service providers are actually providing to them. I'll add one other piece here, because you also get a bit of what are the really popular themes that you hear in the marketplace. And so if you just went sort of by headlines or signals from media, you would think that the fastest growing and biggest needs are all around ESG, environmental, social, and governance concerns, as well as digital assets like cryptocurrencies being an example there. So these are definitely things that are on everyone's radar. But at HFS, we think a lot in terms of investment horizons. Horizon 1 is what you're doing right now. That's your actual execution and operation. Horizon 2, things that you're exploring, piloting. Horizon 3 are things that are in the future that are under consideration. ESG and digital assets, they're still Horizon 2, making their way into Horizon 1, which literally means people are spending money on them, from an ESG standpoint, figuring out their reporting requirements, both for their internal needs and again in the capital markets. If you have green assets or green investments that are part of your portfolio, how do you report on that? Elements such as that. So very much on the radar, but still not the fastest growing demand, but certainly something to watch.
Yeah, very interesting and dynamic marketplace, that's for sure. So Elena, can you give me an overview of the top providers, who they are and where they excel?
Absolutely. So in this top 10 report, we assessed 12 providers, and we assess them across 4 key buckets of characteristics with lots of nuances underneath them. But we look at their execution capabilities, how they deliver depth and breadth, elements such as that tied to execution. We look at their innovation capabilities, both strategy and direction, but also their own investment in intellectual property, their cultivation of ecosystems and partnerships, and their ability to co-innovate with clients. That's all captured under innovation. We assess them across and the HFS category of alignment with one office. One office is HFS speak for ability to drive digital transformation. The one office connotes what gets digitally transformed is breaking down the silos that keep business units apart and from processes from being effective. So you get rid of front, middle, and back office and get the only office that matters, the one office. So we assess them upon their internal alignment to one office, literally their own transformation, and their ability to help their clients achieve the one office. And that last but not least, the 4th big bucket of assessment is voice of the customer. As I mentioned, we take great care to make sure that customers are well represented in terms of both what they want and what their thoughts are of their providers. So The big reveal here. So the top 5 out of our study in the number 1 slot is Accenture. Number 2 is TCS. Number 3 is Infosys. Number 4 is Wipro. And rounding out the big 5 is EY. What I will say just briefly a bit about what these all have in common. I'd mentioned the capital markets is a variety of subdomains. What these providers all had in common is very deep industry expertise that goes across the subdomains. What I think is very fair to state is that it's incredibly, given the sort of multifaceted nature of the capital markets sector, if you will, it's incredibly hard for any single provider to excel at everything, literally all of the subdomains of capital markets, in all of the geographies. That's incredibly, incredibly hard. So while no provider really does that perfectly across every geography, the ones that the 5 that I just mentioned do it decently well. And everybody has their sort of variation of strengths. But they all also bring a strong complement of consulting, design, IT and business process expertise, heavy on the IT, but the business process expertise is also incredibly relevant in terms of optimizing processes and running businesses, like post-trade, for example, literally these transactions, like what needs to happen after you sold a security. There's just a ton of work that actually needs to be done. And that falls into the business process zone, if you will. Accenture prevailed overall for having the full best complement across our 4 different factors, the evaluation criteria that I mentioned, and really having the deepest and the broadest, both of those things, coverage across the full domain, across the geographies, and having just really invested in that depth for several decades, as well as consisting to do so. They also, as I mentioned in the subdomains, no one does it's like all of the different subdomains are never really like at the exact same level. And what you see with Accenture, for example, is their work in trading operations and on the sell side is perhaps a bit more mature, but they've optimized a lot of the capabilities there with a variety of emerging technology. But asset and wealth management, particularly wealth management in the US, is something that's on the rise for them, and with a lot of that activity centering around some of that digital customer experience that I had mentioned before. So Accenture overall took the top prize, and their customers definitely came through for them in terms of really being able to cite strong examples of how Accenture is really delivering both business value and financial value to them. TCS has the number 2 slot. TCS is, it's a gigantic behemoth. Financial services overall, of which capital markets is a part of, is the biggest business unit, industry business unit within TCS, and it's absolutely massive. The key thing to understand about TCS is that in addition to its services capability and that strong breadth across the domains that I've mentioned, it also has its sister product business, the banks set of portfolios. And while they do license and sell this technology separately, they truly have created that as a separate legal entity. There, of course, is all kinds of synergies between TCS services and the bank's product portfolio. And TCS builds a lot of services, managed services around that, that's very differentiated for them. Infosys in the 3rd spot. Infosys, worth noting, was the number 1, held the number 1 slot in our broader banking and financial service report in 2021. They fared very well here, rounding out our top 3. Capital markets has been an area that they had the foresight probably 5 years or so ago to create this as a distinct and separate business unit, and have just been really investing in it and growing it aligned to the different subdomains, particularly certainly in the US, and then increasingly within Europe. And then you also have like one of their big notable contract wins, which is, for the love of God, is completely just with one of their big contract wins, Vanguard, which occurred during the pandemic. It's in the retirement space. It's something that sort of leans into capital markets. And we're not just going to talk about that one big win in perpetuity. What they've been able to do, which we look at as a very strong sign of growth, is be able to take that win and be able to build a retirement center of excellence and win a bunch of new business on top of that. So emphasis has just been growing very, very well. Fourth place, Wipro. What's incredibly notable to know about Wipro, they've been in this business for a long time. Their trading capabilities, pre, during, and post-trade capabilities have been around and strong and renowned for a long, long time. They've complemented that with asset and wealth management over time. The big thing about Wipro, though, is they acquired Capco. Capco is a financial services specialist. Essentially a consultancy. What you have now with the increasingly well-integrated Capco and Wipro combo is what I like to call strategy-led execution. Capco used to not be able to do they could advise, but they couldn't really do big delivery. Wipro, because all of these firms like to say they're consultants, but how much revenue they book for consultancy is perhaps more negligible than you might think. But you take a firm like Wipro, they do consultative things, but they're supreme with delivery. You bring these guys together, you get strategy-led execution. That's been really key to a very strong rise within Wipro. And what we're seeing and will continue to see from Wipro is getting out of the core sweet spot of traditional Wipro, which is all about the CIO's office, and expanding through Capco to other domains. Just think literally the rest of the C-suite where Capco has been advising and supporting for the last couple of decades. And then last but not least, EY. We included Deloitte and PwC in this analysis as well. EY was the only one to crack the top 5. The key thing to understand about EY, they broadly have a very large global financial services practice. So capital markets for them is with capital markets, and they have what they call WAM, Wealth and Asset Management. We looked at both of those for this study. EY has had just a formidable WAM practice, wealth and asset management, for the better part of a decade, probably pushing 15 years or so. They were one of the first to really build this out, and it's just really the cornerstone, sort of the shiny diamond, if you will, of what their capabilities are. Their true investment banking, sort of the sell side part of capital markets, is merged with its banking capability. We assessed it independently for this study, but those are very, very enmeshed. So the sort of shining star, again, that shiny diamond. I don't know why I'm going with gemstones today, but that's something that really helps differentiate EY, and that's continues to be both a growth area, and as they're doing a lot of work on their own strategy and investing in platforms like their Nexus platform. They're developing a variety of interesting ways, I'll couch it as such, interesting ways for EY to be able to stay in accounts, still lead with strategy and consultancy and some implementation, but because they're developing some of their own IP in the form of platforms like Nexus, to have those as the managed service, sort of the product-led managed service leave behind, so that they're increasingly sticky within their clients, and it allows them to have different types of relationships with their clients. Honestly, if you're included in an HFS top 10, it means that you are the creme de la creme as it stands of the service provider community. The 5 that I've just stepped through are sort of the best, if you will, but there's a whole variety of the other providers that were covered in this report. Everyone brings something to the table, because as I mentioned, just being able to work across the subdomains of capital markets, and then you bring in the geographic element. Everybody really shines someplace. So I would certainly not be one to say everyone is a winner, because that's the entire reason we stack rank in our reports. None of these 2x2 grids where everyone's a winner. But within it, you can very clearly see, as an enterprise consuming this based on what your needs are, you can really pick and choose the right provider to you based on our assessment criteria. Yeah. But that, Mr. Edwards, is Capital Markets Services top 10 in a somewhat sizable nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it really shows what a comprehensive amount of work goes into something like this, and the all the things we consider as we rank these providers. And you did a great job of providing an overview. Really appreciate it, Elena.
Thank you, Mark. And thanks everyone for taking a listen. Dive in on this report. As Mark suggests, it is chock full. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yep. And you can read this top 10 at hfsresearch.com, along with all of our research and a growing library of videocasts just like this one. And we'll see you on the next HFS Videocast.
Thank you.